Good morning and welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. It's good to see you. I'm in a different place this morning. I don't know if you can tell. I'm sure you can tell. I'm in my mother's memory museum in her house in Connecticut. We are visiting. It is more chaotic than usual. But welcome to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I am happy to see you. I don't know if you noticed that we changed our content for today because I forgot a book. So today on this show, we will be doing a pop-up episode of tips and tricks for rug hooking, punching, dyeing, all manner of things for those of you who are rug makers of any kind. And I'm going to more than invite you, I'm going to encourage you, ask you, beg you, plead with you to share your great hacks and secrets for rug making. Have you got any hacks or secrets for rug making?
No.
Not at this moment. You'll think of one though, right? So I want to say good morning to everybody, and I will come back to the thread in just a minute. We are here just this one time at a different hour so that we can do some nice stuff later. Summertime babies can do some nice stuff later. I'm running it early just today. Then we will be back to our normal schedule of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday next week. I want to remind you that this coming Friday is bingo night. So if you're looking for your bingo card, it is rug hooking bingo, and our theme is actually geometrics. I know that's a great favorite, and a huge thank you to Kira for making those sheets. Geometric bingo night coming up this Friday, and if you need your cards, the link to the cards is in the body, the description of this video. All right, baby, I'm going to get going with the show. You want to come back and visit us later?
Yep.
You can bring a chair and perch next to me if you want. So, as bye, can you shut the door behind you? As things go along and our group grows and grows, we seem to be putting together an amazing collection of tips and tricks. And also, sort of in the background running, I'm constantly having at least once a week a tip sent to me by Donna Swanson at Whispering Hill in Connecticut, right in the quiet corner of Connecticut, Woodstock. She's been sending me fantastic tips that I kind of save for times like this when I have made a boo-boo and I have got to go impromptu. So I have a bunch of her tips and tricks. We're going to be combining those with some obvious ones that I have found and figured out over time, and talking about those, and hopefully you adding to the thread your great tips and tricks. Good morning to all my buddies out there. I see Gayla and Linda out there, and Karen, I just got your message. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to the thread. I want to remind you as well, I don't know if you're on my email sign-up list, but we have an important date coming up in July. So obviously that is super soon. July, what is it? Let me see. Is it? No, I'm in June. That's not helping. July 14th is a Thursday. That is our next field trip as a group. If you are anywhere in this area, to go with me and our group to Cape Ann, to the two houses, Cogswell Grant and Beauport. The link to that day trip is in the body, also the description to this video. But it is going to be a wonderful day out for us. Both of those house museums are very historic, and they both have huge and important collections of old rugs. So great inspiration there. If you're looking at old rugs and you're thinking, oh, I'd like to have that one. Well, with these old ones, you can have them. You can take a photograph of it and do the exact same rug, right? Because these are all quite old antique rugs and quite important ones at that. So super fun. So let me get started with the content, and then I'll come back to the thread and I'll give you some more reminders as the show goes on, because we have quite a few things going on. Before I forget, happy Pink Day. It is Pink Day. So luckily I had a pink top with me. I could also switch to these at any moment, just so we know. I just can't see out of them so well. As luck has it, we're staying at my mom's for a few days. I've got my pink top, and I'm working on a very heavily pink piece right here. I've got a very pink background going in this piece. I'll show you that later, but this is one of the original designs I'm doing for the current book for Rug Cooking Magazine, the Design Like. Remember, the Design Like Monet is also up there. We have a ton of sign up for that. Make sure you sign up for that. That'll be a great class, and I'm working on some Monet patterns to put out and a Monet swatch set to put out too, because obviously his colors are a very big deal. So here they come. I'm going to hit you with some tips and tricks. Now you tell me whether you think that these are good ones, bad ones, ones that you've tried, ones that you've used, or if you have figured out something better, different, parallel, similar. Let me know, because everybody's trips and you know what I'm trying to say, are quite different. And one of the few things that sort of predates rug hooking are these sort of superstitious, old time, and Yankee type adages, like there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So when we name a tip and say this is how you do it, baby, it's not necessarily how you do it. It's one of many ways to do it. So you chime in with your ways as well. These are some of the tips that Donna Swanson sent me from Whispering Hill in, again, Woodstock, Connecticut. Beautiful shop, lots of events coming up there. I've announced quite a few of them. I'm signed up for the Banana Split coming up, and I'll be reminding you as time goes on of all of the great events and classes that happen at her store if you are in that area that borders the Rhode Island border there. Her first tip, and I'm not sure if I covered some of these because she sends them often. She's super kind and forthcoming with her tips. As a McGowan certified teacher, she has been teaching for decades. She is very, very astute. She's very knowledgeable. And she sends tips a lot. So I'm sorry if these are broken record ones, but I didn't remember these myself. She says 1 yard of yarn is approximately enough yarn to do 2.5 inches of whip stitching. If that's how you want to finish your borders with whip stitching, 1 yard of yarn is enough to do 2.5 inches. Now, if you think about it, it doesn't seem like a lot, does it? But doing a whip stitch to finish your border is a quite materials intensive way to do it. And there's a lot of ways to do it. We'll come back to that in this episode. There's a lot of ways. A lot of people prefer the whip stitch over anything because it gives the rug, particularly if it's on the floor, a very high, dense, thick, safe border, right? So it's very well protected with the whip stitch. Some people feel like with the whip stitch, it's a great jack tripper opportunity to trip over the rug. Of course, you don't have to hook the whip stitch very, very thick. You don't have to kind of pad it. Most people will run, some people will run. I tend to run like a gauge of that fluffy kind of bat cord, right, that comes in different gauges, so very thin to very thick. I tend to run a quite thin piece of bat around and whip around. If I will whip, it's not my favorite finish at all, but for no reason other than the aesthetic of not wanting an extra color border typically with my work. But for those of you that do, just remember that there are different thicknesses gauge of that batting cord that you can whip around, and that will dictate how high the border becomes. And if your border does become too high, it is a tripper for sure, but it doesn't have to be. You can keep it quite level with the rug and still give it that nice safety around the edges. Juliet, good morning. Good to see you. Let me scroll up a little bit and see who else is here. Karen, Cindy, good to see you. And Linda H. Katz Gallery. Joyce, great to see everybody in Pennsylvania. Susan, Kansas, great to see you. Kirsten, I'm glad you noticed that I was running at a different time today. And Carol, Cindy, great to see you. Nada, I haven't seen you for a while. Great to see you. And Jen, hello in Hello in New Hampshire, one of my favorite states. Heading up there for Santa's Village a little bit later in the year. What a fun place. So, that's a really good one. Having these finite numbers for measuring and planning your materials is a very big deal, isn't it? I think that in general, and it's just my opinion, sometimes we can get a bit too consumed in the planning of the rug and feeling like I have got to take that 5-hour road trip to that big mill store to get, I don't mean anyone in specific. For me, it's Store Mill, and I have a wholesale account with them, so I often go, but for you, it might be something different. You don't have to take that 5-hour road trip to go and collect all of your end-all, do-all materials, and the world is going to end if you haven't got everything on that shopping trip. And you're thinking about the backing, you're thinking about the pattern, you're thinking about all of your colors, you're thinking about how much, you're thinking about your border. So finite tips like this, especially from somebody like Donna, who is super knowledgeable, are super, super helpful. I will add, and I say this a lot, but if you're just coming to me, early, hi, Joan, good to see you. Southern Soil, great to see you back. And Colleen, great to see you. Good morning. I forward fold, and then, okay, so Colleen's giving us a great tip because Beech Nut Studio is her company, which is a beautiful rug hooking company with lots of super, super summery, nautical, and all kinds of designs, but really well done and beautiful. Colleen says, good morning. I forward fold and then I whip with a number 6 noodle so I can make it flatter. That's a great tip. Some people shy away from whip stitching the edges with noodles, meaning wool strips. I would say don't do that, right? It's not that difficult to whip with a noodle. particularly if you have them left over, particularly if you want the border to match exactly with what you've done in the center, then it is a good tip. But I love this idea, Colleen, of not adding a cord, just folding forward and whipping around it, because then it will not come up too high and too lumpy bumpy, and it will not become a jack tripper. Good morning, Lisa. Good to see you too. And Wendy, good to see you. That's okay. It's going to be, I'm doing probably a 45-minute blast today because the kids are raring to go to Friendly's restaurant. If you can remember those, we've got a local one. So I say this often, but in terms of how much material you use if you're coming at this as a beginner, the sort of standard most people will say for wool, not for yarn, but for wool, that you need about 3 times the surface area. So for example, last night we were doing our 1985 cat. Let's say I want to hook just my cat, right? This is a hand drawing. This is not the pattern. I did this when my glasses were like this, I guess. But if I wanted to fill the cat, I would need 3 times the amount of the cat's body, right? I always do 4 times because I'm pretty crazy about making sure people are all set up, right? Setting you up for success when I send a kit out. I do 4 times routinely or more because some of us are the higher hookers, some of us are lower hookers, some of us pack a little more, whether packing is not necessarily a beginner thing. Some people pack for their whole lives. And it's just the way that they hook. It's just a sort of natural inclination that's hard to overcome, and they get used to working around it. And those people, of course, the high hookers and the slight packers, that sounds so weird, doesn't it? Will need a little bit more wool. So I will always say 4 times the surface area. Donna says 2.5 inches per 1 yard for 2.5 inches of border if you're whipping. Second hint she gives is when hooking cats, maybe I should have read this one before, don't hook the whiskers because your eye will fill that in, the whisker part. The cat looks much better not having those lines across the face. Now, I am going to say that I put mine downstairs, my cat. I did hook the whiskers. I am going to say that some of these tips we can agree or not agree, or the jury's out with some. Some of them are personal preference tips for sure. Now, Donna hooks. She is Promogown certified. She is expert. She is lovely. She is knowledgeable. And she's a seasoned veteran for sure. But she hooks very much in the more sort of realistic style, right? So she routinely hooks with 3s, and she prefers, in her work at least, much more realism than many of us do. If you hook more in the graphic style, like ribbon candy hooking my work, and a lot of other people who are out now doing much more graphic pop art looking work, then that kind of a rule does not hold because you are already perhaps hooking an outline in the style of Tiffany glass, right? Stained glass, or an outline in the style of something cartoony. We talked a little bit in class last night about when you are outlining something, right? It gives it a lot of stability, but sometimes you just want a suggestion of an outline. Thinking of painters, fine art painters, someone like Monet or Renoir, who kind of fill in blocks of color with loose color and then fill in on top of it, overlay the color that they really mean once they've shaped out the composition. If you like the way that sort of painterly approach looks, then you should be outlining in a very thin cut, like a 2, 3, 4, or yarn. Because when you do that, and then you fill it in with the color you intend, it becomes very interrupted, your outlining. It becomes much less lead glass Tiffany style or sort of Celtic knot style, and it becomes much more sort of painterly. So there's a big distinction in those 2 looks. It's just another idea, hi Lynn, for something that you could think about. Graphic style versus realistic, photorealistic. These are all different sort of levels of style. If there was kind of a thermometer that went from super primitive, 9 and above cut, ripped selvages, just big ripped pieces, old-timey, traditional, historical type hooking, if you were to go all the way up that little thermometer and you were to come right through the middle, I think most people are in the middle hooking something between a 5 and a 7. But then, you go down to the people who are hooking in the sort of middle 20th century style, the certified teacher style that is 3s. And that is a very small cut. And in that case, you do open the possibilities up of doing a lot of photorealism. Great sort of photography type faces in your hooking, pets, people, landscapes with glints, glimmers, like little diamonds of light, right? Not these big, bold graphic areas or any kind of hit or miss stuff going on. Very different styles within this one craft. Donna's rugs are amazing. I should go back there and do some more close photographs. Maybe I'll do that on Banana Split Day in August. Heidi, great to see you in Belgium. I missed you. I was thinking about you while I was in the shower, of all places. For no particular reason. You just popped into my mind and I was thinking about you. So as far as those lines go, the whiskers go across the face. This is really an up for grabs, and it really depends on your opinion too. You know, it depends on how much graphic quality you like to your work versus realism, because she's absolutely right. If you want a very realistic piece, those very clunky sort of whiskers could get in the way of that. But if you really want a graphic piece and you want your cat to look a bit more sort of cartoony and pop art-y, then I would include the whiskers. So some of these things will have to be qualified. Cat's Gallery says that is a perfect thank you. You know, I try to tread very carefully because there's such a difference over the decades between people, and it wasn't just Pro McGowan who certified. There was a lot of teachers certifying at that time, but they were certifying in a very particular style starting around 1950, because what else happened in 1950? Paint by number came out in 1950. And people got very much in the habit post-war of wanting to do these great new hobbies, but maybe coming at them with no expertise or sort of pre-knowledge of the thing at all. And for that reason, it was very appealing for a lot of people to have a paint by number situation where somebody would say to you, this is the area, you make it this color. Whether you're painting it or hooking it, you make it this color. And then if you want the face to look realistic, move over to the cheek and give it a highlight in white. That's this color. And you could be told, literally stitch to stitch and loop to loop, block to block on your paint canvas, exactly how to fill it in to get exactly the picture on the box. Now this still appeals to people who are more technical hookers. The people who are more creative hookers like me, that I wish I could be a bit more technical, but I can't buckle down and do it because I don't enjoy it. Right? I don't enjoy the technical part of it, so I don't think about or pursue or obsess about the technical part of it. Works the same way for people who are technical. When other people keep saying to you, oh, let it rip, change your pattern, draw what you want. Yeah, rip your pieces if you don't want to cut them perfectly, equal each time. For people who are very technical, that stuff is equally as annoying as in the reverse, because they're like, that's the part that I enjoy, being very precise. When something is off, it makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I've wasted my money. If that's how you feel, you're a more technical person. So, we honor both and we try to find something in the middle, and we talk about every style and every type so that you never think that whatever you're hooking, whether it is a pig's breakfast hit or miss hodgepodge like the work that I do, or you have got something super realistic and you've got a portrait of your grandchildren and each one looks just like them, including the pets. We want to cover all of that in the conversation, but we never, ever want to make one of them wrong or even one of them better than the other, because they are neither. They are two completely different styles. I prefer a farmhouse over a Property Brothers, open floor plan house. We all have different preferences. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It means that when something's going wrong, like you're saying to yourself, this doesn't look right, I need more information in this pattern, it's not coming out like the picture, you might be a more technical person. And if that's the case, some of these tips will appeal to you more. Donna works in a much more technical style than I do, but I do know that people who are Pro McGowan certified, like last year, in the last couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, they're learning a lot more about both schools of hooking. So we are kind of normalizing and celebrating, even in Celebration magazine, all different kinds of styles, and not just that one style that was very dominant and visible for decades in the 20th century. Another great tip of hers, I think this is a really good one, dull checks. So in other words, like a patterned wool, like a checkered wool, and drab plaids are excellent for hooking leaves. Now that would be a great tip. I'm going to take this tip next time I hook one of my autumn things coming up soon. Not too soon, it's still summer, right? But I agree, the dull checks and the drab plaids, that's a big deal, because when you're doing leaves, whether you like the graphic style or you like the sort of photorealism, very extreme, you know, it is nice to get color variation in your leaves, particularly if you're doing like a chunk of, this is a good example, a chunk of sort of bushes. So I've got this character here, and I've got a chunk of bushes here, and this is all velvet I'm hooking in. I've got some color changing velvet coming up here to make it'll all come together, believe me, when you see it in a distance. But I've got color changing velvet coming in to do the sort of spines and stuff, and then I've got two shades of greens, a really dark green, more toward like a bodily teal than a cooler olive, right? I've got cool blues and greens happening here, but I've got two different color um, greens to make that work. And I am cutting. This is very thin. I'm cutting about twice as wide as that with my scissors as I go. So for me, when I'm working with a big clumpy clunk, right, big dumpy round piece of bush that will signify and create a bush, it is nice to hook with something that is patterned, because even though I haven't worked a lot of definition into the bush, like individual leaves and stems, with color changing material, like done as dull checks and drab plaids, it will come out fantastic and interesting with a lot of color change, a lot of depth, but just the interest is the thing, right? That is a great tip. She says, as a rule, I know we've talked about this one before. As a rule, Oriental rugs are hooked in three colors using any number of shades of these three colors. Now, this is an interesting one. I know we've touched on this during the episodes we did probably on Helen Albee, Abenaki rugs, right? Possibly some of our other sort of Native American themed episodes, or possibly looking at Pearl McGowan's Oriental rugs, right? Because we just said Oriental rugs for lack of better, more specific language at the time that Oriental rugs were so important to rug hooking. Um, Pearl McGowan lumps Oriental rugs. They are everything from South American rugs to Eastern European rugs to Asian rugs. And her sacred rugs, that what she calls sacred rugs, fall into that category too. Those would be Eastern European rugs that have sort of a prayer rug formation that are one-sided. So this is a great tip for that style of rug. And again, Donna is thinking Pearl McGowan without a doubt. And I think that that's a good call overall, because when you're hooking an Oriental rug, they are certainly, number one, busy. And the success of the pattern in terms of color will really depend on the placement of the colors. So if you've got 100 different color families going and you're doing like a hit or miss style Oriental rug, it could be very exciting, but there's a very good chance that you would lose the design with that kind of busyness. So saying that there are three sort of overarching colors here, let's as a placeholder say navy, rust, and olive green. She's not just saying just use those three colors. She's saying use every shade of those three colors, and maybe you can push the olive green toward bronze green, right? Because it's in that similar family. And maybe you can push the rust here and there to cranberry, just right outside of the color, or even a like blazing orange kind of a color. It would still work the same way. You could build in that color variation. And it is a great exercise in hooking to think about doing any kind of a geometric rug, whether it's an Oriental rug or straight out geometric. Our bingo night's going to help with that on Friday, right? Because that's a geometric theme. Doing it with just three color families. So that's a great exercise, and I think that that is a really solid tip. Of course, some of Pearl McGowan's rugs that are Oriental rugs have a lot of Oriental work on the border and then still the floral medallion in the middle. Now that would be a different story. That would be a game changer. So this rule would not hold for those situations. Hello, Crystal. Good to see you. Look at your little flower. April, great to see you too. Colleen also says hooking is like painting with wool, and there are many styles in painting, so there are in hooking, and they are all right. Absolutely. We are always on the same page, Colleen. We are the same like person. It's so important, I think, for this I don't want to say generation, but this moment in hooking, as we drop off the map as a population, right? It's so important for so many of us with voices and platforms like Colleen to be saying these words like, if you like to hook this way, it's okay. If you like to hook that way, it's okay. We're all pulling up loops, right? Even if you love latching and you don't like hooking, you're still using a hook to pull something through a backing. It's all the same. There's glory in all of these things. Your particular style is not my particular style. Maybe it is. But you know what I mean. It's so important to celebrate every style, every person's work, because everybody's doing something special and certainly unique. She says, this is a stains tip. Club soda helps clean pet stains out of rugs. I have not had that happen to me yet. I wonder if you have, or if you feel that club soda is good, or if there's something that's better. I just don't know. This tip I think we've talked about before. I'm not sure from Donna, but she says in terms of inspiration and finding sources for your designing, vintage coloring books make good sources for design elements when trying to design your own rug. I think elements is the key to this statement because it really depends on the coloring book that you're using, doesn't it? Just because it's vintage doesn't mean that the artist, the person has to have died 70 years ago in the United States for their work to be in the public domain. And that usually, more than 99% of the time, is the case. Once in a while, the family has maintained the estate, or somebody owns specific works, and those do not fall into the category because the copyright has been maintained on specific pieces. That hardly ever happens. That tends to happen with very famous people. But you look at artists like Van Gogh, Monet, all of their work is in the public domain. So more often than not, that 70-year rule will work. You do have to look for other countries for their rules. I think Canada is still 50. For a while, it was 100 years in both countries, and that has changed. The laws do change, so it's worth checking. I'm just going to be very naughty and say to you, if you fall in love with something that you would love to hook, you should quietly hook it and don't show it to people online and give other people the opportunity to say, did you get permission from the artist? Because it's very jarring and upsetting for all of us when we feel like people are getting scolded. If you're not getting permission from somebody, or you cannot figure out about the estate of someone who is gone, it is maybe best to not let other people know too much, because it just opens the door for aggravation. And it doesn't open the door for anything else, because I can tell you absolutely from a legal standpoint, if you make a boo-boo with copyright because you copied the page out of a vintage coloring book and somebody comes at you out of nowhere, they're going to come at you with a cease and desist, right? And that rarely happens. The only instances I've heard of this, very, very few, but on a great scale, would be coming from a company like Disney or Random House, something like that. Life magazine, I heard of somebody getting blasted by Life magazine, but rightfully so, because she was doing something she didn't realize was on quite such a big scale and quite so illegal. But you do get the cease and desist. So I don't want to put the fear of God in you about using vintage coloring book pages, but I like the word elements that she uses in this one, because if you're looking, for example, for a Halloween piece that you would like to design on your own, and you're thinking, I'm not the best artist, I need some ideas, and you find a pile of vintage coloring books or reading books, or you find some stuff online that works, it makes a lot of sense to say, I like the way that this witch looks, I like the way the body's posed, and I like the way that this witch looks, but I like the doorway of that and the way that the trick-or-treaters are lined up, and I like the skeleton tree over here. And I'm going to put together kind of a composite of these different elements into one. Now, that would work, right? I wouldn't do that, still piece together other people's work and sell it commercially. But you can certainly do that for your own design. And I think that's exactly what Donna means when you're looking at these sort of vintage sources, whether they're children's books or coloring books. It's very hard to find out the copyright situations with some of these books, because most of these publishers don't exist anymore. I've tried to get in touch with like Grosset Dunlop so many times, and they don't respond. So some of these publishers now fall under the umbrella of larger publishers, and it is very hard to make contact. Thus, you're ready to do the project. You've been waiting for 3 months for somebody to answer you. You don't have the answer. Can you do it or can you not do it? You like this vintage coloring book page. Again, if you're putting it on your wall and you're not selling it commercially, I would say personally, and I know I'm going to get blasted, but just do it. Just like Nike, just do it. If you're working on commercial designs and things like that, that's a different ballgame altogether. And if you are, hopefully you have some original ideas too, and this doesn't come up very often. Nada says, I've always asked the contemporary artists for permission to hook their work, and I've never been turned down. They all ask for a photo of the completed work to see their art as expressed in wool. I absolutely so glad that you wrote that, Nada, because that is so true. Wouldn't you be so honored if somebody approached you, a stranger, and said, listen, I love your work so much. I love this piece. It speaks to me. I want to celebrate it by working on it for 100 hours, hooking it, right? Or more. Of course, that person is going to say, absolutely, I appreciate it. There's very, very few people who wouldn't. Picasso's probably one of them, but he's not around anymore. So that's out. Most people are very kind and forthcoming and flattered, no matter how successful they are. There might be exceptions of people who are super nice people, but very, very visible. Greeting card artists, Marjorie, what's her name? Begins with a B. Mary Engelbright, people like that who are still having a very busy career. Susan Branch, people like that. I don't know. I would definitely want to get in touch with those kinds of people who are very, very visible. But contemporary artists that you saw in a gallery or you stumbled upon their work online, that's a great source of inspiration. And I would be shocked and very disappointed if in those situations the person did not say to you, like they always have to Nada, absolutely, I'm flattered. Let me see what it looks like when I'm done. I'm so curious. Absolutely, right? Give it a shot. Okay, Heidi, thank you. In Belgium, it's 70 years. So interesting. You see how different it is from country to country, the copyright law, and it's worth checking out. And how do you check that out? You simply Google public domain in the US, public domain in Belgium, any country, right? And it will say to you, the first result that will pop up is the artist has to be dead for 70 years for the thing to drop into the public domain. There's also a site called Public Domain that is loaded with art. It is loaded with art, artists that you've never heard of before. So there's many ways. Hi, Eugenia, good to see you in Arkansas. There's so many ways that you can approach this. But I'm very happy, at least on our page, which is Rug Cooking and Punch Needle Club, I have noticed lately some opportunities for people to be blasted for putting things up that are not quite right. And in those situations, not meaning copyright issues, in those situations, I sometimes send a little note and say, just so you know, you might get a comment on this thread because this is probably owned by, for example, the Pokemon company or something like that. But I know that it was done for personal use. I'm not personally worried about it being on this site. I'm not going to take it down. But I always like to give people the kinds of heads up, particularly if they're new, because they don't know this. And they're just thinking, what is my grandson like, right? We don't want to crucify people who are looking for a pillow to make for their grandson. And we tend to, I have not seen it in our group. I've seen one or two comments I wasn't that fond of over all this time. And we are now at almost 10,000 people in our Facebook group. That reminds me, it came up last night in the 1985 CAT class, and it comes up often. I know that we used to do a Zoom once a week. At one time I was doing a Zoom twice a week. This is before writing books and getting quite busy with the business. And I really, truly, and sincerely miss that because that's my downtime to connect with you, And I hate not having that. My schedule has been such that I have been crazy for a long time and just working right up until bedtime. And this is busyness that is my own fault that I have created. But in the back of my mind, I'm constantly thinking about classes. I'm constantly thinking of beginners, bringing beginners into the class. It's summertime now. I'm thinking about the kids and what I need to do with them. Joss wants to do a new craft today that she's never done before. I'm thinking 3 a.m, what is that craft? What will that be? But, there's a lot going on for me, and I'm working on the second book, and I'm working on this quilting branch of the company, too. So there's a lot going on, trying to create a company that's viable for my kids so that in the future, if they wanted to, hopefully very long time from now, I'm only 50, but hopefully it's something that they might be able to pick up in the future. So I've got a lot of things on my mind, and I'm a bit overextended at this moment. The point is, I wonder if anybody, I'm just putting the word out there, and send me an email at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. I wonder if anybody would like to sort of at least once a week, right, take over the starting a Zoom call thing. And I can tell you there is probably at least a 75% chance, if not 100, that every time there's a Zoom call, I'll log on too as a participant and work on a piece for as long as I can before I start to sweat and think about orders and other things I need to get done. But if anybody did want to reinstate that, with 10,000 members in the Facebook group alone, and we're heading toward 10,000 on YouTube too, and they're not the same people necessarily. Some are crossover, but not all. So different audience there too. If somebody would like to be in charge of that, please send me a message because I would love to know that Zoom call continued and I will log on every chance I get, even if I just sit and hook for a few minutes, which is good for me. I would love to be there. And then if I have to log off because I'm crazy or I need to be somewhere, you all can stay on and hook together and share your tips and secrets and thoughts and everything. It'd be very nice. I'd love to see that come back. So let me know if you have the time for that, because I would be very serious about participating every time. I just don't want to be the person who presses the button and ends the button, because it's just a little bit more responsibility that I can handle right now. Same thing with the book club. If anybody wants to bring the book club back, there are lots of people waiting for the book club. Just let me know. You are welcome, even if you're new to the group, to get involved in these ways. So let's move on from the vintage coloring books. I think that's a good conversation, good line of conversation, something we'll talk about from time to time. If the copyright law changes in countries that I access often, like Canada, like European countries, like the US, I will let you know. I'll always let you know about changes like that. Another kind of tip she had that I think is really interesting: touch up a rug. We've talked about this. Touch up a rug with a toothbrush dipped in dye. So I've heard toothbrush, I've heard paintbrush. A lot of people like to, if they buy an old rug somewhere else, or if you hooked a rug like in the 1950s, 60s, right? It's entirely possible that you did. And you want to touch it up. You want to be sure, you know what color you're using and what intensity of color you're using. Always better to go very sort of light on the dye powder, right? Keep it light. You can always add layers and levels of color. But if you put too much color in it, that's kind of the opposite problem. You don't want things to be too wet either. So a fairly dry toothbrush, I would say. I prefer a paintbrush for this kind of thing, I have to admit. And you know that there are people right now who are hooking white, whole background hooked white, and then painting the tops of their loops. We've seen this in Rug Hooking Magazine. We've talked about this on the show. This is an interesting approach, because you're combining both hooking as textile art and painting. And you don't have to be a great painter to do this, but you can get very fine detail having hooked number 8 or number 9 in your background. So this is an interesting thing. It's great for geometrics too. This is an interesting sort of trend that's happening right now in rug hooking, something you might be interested in. And if that's the case, using a toothbrush or a paintbrush to apply dye to the surface that's already got loops in it is a great idea. Just watch the amount of water you've got, particularly if it's an old rug and it's a burlap base, because then we're talking about the possibility of rotting. We don't want soaking wet times, right? And that's a really good idea. And if you are going to do that, another good tip that's related for, it's a painter's tip, is that you should, whether you think your brushes are clean or not, it is worth taking paintbrushes, if you're going to use them to paint your loops, putting your paintbrushes to soak in like hair conditioner or fabric softener for like a half hour will completely clean them. Completely clean them. Because we're not talking about like painting with oils and gunky stuff and all that, right? If you just have used them in the past and you're not 100% sure that that blue isn't on there, then it's good to use conditioner, fabric softener, soak them. It will loosen up everything that's on there, and that will be super clean. That's one of my tips that I use when I used to do more painting than I do now. She says, lift spots from a rug using cornstarch paste. I have heard that too. I have not done that myself. I do have some filthy rugs, so maybe that is coming up on the horizon. Karen says, if you acknowledge the artist who inspired the piece in your title, inspired by... it's more than okay in the case of Monet, because he is public domain. So I would say that it is a Monet, just in case people look at it and go, God, I love that. How can I find it? I want to do something like that, or that very thing. It's a good it's a good cue for them to be helpful and be able to find something. But you should say if it's Van Gogh or a Monet for sure. But these public domain pictures at this point, it's not a legal thing. That's the difference. I'm sure you know that, between asking permission or not. You don't have to ask permission, but it's always good form to say what you're inspired by, because it's the worst thing in the world. And I have seen this lately, and I'm not going to start this conversation, but I have seen lately, my friend Mary Jo Taylor of Northwest Folk Designs alerted me to, she has a lot of trouble with people really copying her work, like line for line copying her work. And she's constantly sending, it's been like 3 or 4 times already this year, pictures that people have posted on Facebook groups that are I wouldn't even say remarkably close to hers. I would say they were traced and transferred and just copied different elements, but I mean, same exact drawing. And it's really galling when you see this kind of thing, or you see somebody posting something and you think, gosh, that looks so familiar as a design. Whether we're talking about a Monet or a Northwest folk designs, when you see something that really you feel like deja vu, you've seen this before, and in the thread someone says, oh my gosh, I love that, who, is this your own design? Once in a while the person will write, yes, this is my own design, I designed this myself. And you're looking at it and going, you have got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. That's very galling. So in those situations, feel free, if you run across that, to bring that to my attention. When I handle these things and reach out to people, I always do it behind the scenes in the most diplomatic way, giving the benefit of the doubt. But I just like people to know that other people notice when these things happen. So feel free to do that as well. That's always a thing. Yeah, I think it will eternally be a thing. Sometimes I think it is kind of accidental that the person is so inspired. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt right now. So inspired by something that they don't realize how closely they have allied themselves to the original design. But regardless, it's important for people who work in small craft areas like rug hooking to be able to protect their designs and their businesses, right? Dear, oh dear. Another one I've done is line boxes of wool with newspaper. Moths hate printer's ink. If you still get newspapers, that is a great tip. We've talked about this one before, that the moths hate the printer's ink. That's super useful. We definitely did this one, but I'm going to say it again. If wool sticks to your cutter wheel, spray it with the Windex, right, or any glass cleaner, and just wipe it. That works incredibly well every time. This is one we talked about last night too. We talked about the question that people sometimes come up with as a beginner: do I hook on the line, in the line, or outside of the line? And the traditional and expected answer, and the one I most often give in a beginner's class, is choose one and stick with it. But I would take that a step further and say choose one and stick with it. But if you choose outside the line, just be aware that you are slightly enlarging the pattern, right? Slightly. Just so you know, if that matters at all to you, just be aware that you're doing it. Florals are most pleasing when colors are balanced diagonally. And you know what I think she's thinking of here are these beautiful McGowan style medallion rugs with the center being like a beautiful lush bouquet floral. It is a very good composition tip to think about. Number one, odd numbers. Two or four flowers never looks as good as 3, 5, 7 or more. And balancing those colors diagonally is a very big deal, because you want your eye to zigzag across what you're looking at, whether it's a painting, a rug, whatever. You want it to zigzag like you're reading it. You don't want to miss any of it. And for a person's eye to travel, they have to, that's one of my wind-up calls. It's got to be on my warranty. My car warranty is running out. You want people's eyes to travel, and you can do that by diagonally connecting, because your eye wants to read naturally right to left or left to right, depending on what continent you're from. When your eye travels diagonally, now that is something different for all of us. So it is good to try to match up colors in a floral bouquet, like a couple of fuchsias diagonal, maybe a couple of real indigos or turquoises the other way. It really keeps your eye running, and that is absolutely what you want. She says to touch up a sky in a rug, use a blue crayon. I have never heard this before. I would love some feedback from you on this, because I believe her 100%. She's always right. With technique stuff, she's always right. That's not a matter of opinion. But I don't understand this one, because it's always been my understanding that crayons are made from like a wax base. Is it still the case? And I don't know. And I think of putting wax on fabric, I think of batik, and I don't think of rug hooking. But I mean, I know she's right. But let me know if you've tried this, because for me, this is a complete. This one's like a coming out of nowhere, hitting me like a train. I'm reading it live and going, "Gosh, is that a thing?" This is a cute one. Save snibbles. That's her word for little leftover worms. Save snibbles to fill stuffed animals, pincushions, or clear Christmas balls. You know how people have been doing that lately, buying those little glass balls, sometimes plastic. You can buy them at craft stores. You can buy them on Amazon. And it is a neat thing for a rug hooker to put your like little leftover worms or little yarns or something into those balls. Even for year round, if you've got one of those wire trees like I do that you keep up year round, it's not necessarily Christmas if you even celebrate Christmas. But I like to have some little ornaments on there from different road trips I take, and I would like to put a little clear ball on there with some snibbles in it as a little hat tip to our rug hooking, right? Be super cute and super nice. It'd also be nice, thinking about it, taking it to an extreme. It's logical extreme to make a garland like for in front of the fireplace with those little balls hanging down, or like a valance, over your window in your studio area with these balls dropping down with all of your snibbles in them. What a colorful little garland that would make, wouldn't it? And the effect would be it would remind you of all those colors. If you made each ball like a little blue palette, little antique gold palette, little green palette, it could be super inspiring to look at your colors and say, ooh, dusty mauve, interesting. Crystal said, wouldn't that create a wax resist? God, I would think so. I would think so. I'm not a scientist, that's for sure. I mean, it must work because she does it, but I don't understand the science of it. It might be just this kind of quick fix thing, because I would certainly think that once you did that, the idea of using a toothbrush or paintbrush to add colors 10 or 20 years later would be a lot more difficult, because now you've introduced wax to the surface. I don't know. Lisa says, our group is saving our snibbles to make pet beds to donate. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Paint beds, pet beds to donate. Lisa, I love that. That is lovely. And you know what that makes me think of? I put down that I put down that Proddy rug in the studio the other day, and Jay's dog, Baby Bell Cheese, came and laid on it. It's that very high relief Proddy rug that I showed you. It's a commercially made one. I was thinking this is a project. I should do a video or something so everybody can see how to do these very rough Proddy rugs from ripped t-shirts and sweaters, like no cutting, just taking parts that are ripped already. Sorry about that. Get rid of that. Sitting right next to my mother's phone. I hope she takes it down there. You know what it said on her phone? Harassment. I wonder if that somehow I get spam risk. She gets the word harassment. Isn't that weird? I was thinking about those Proddy things because I know that the dogs love those Proddy things. And with this particular breed he has, which is the Australian cattle dog, or the Australian, not shepherd. Yeah, no, it is a shepherd. It likes to nose through things, right? It likes things that are shaggy that it can browse through and under, and Proddy rugs are perfect for that. So we should talk more about that too, particularly coming up to the holidays and donating and doing things for pet shelters. They're not only extra warm and cozy, they're super easy to make, extra fast. I mean, you could do several in one day. That's something else we should think about. But Lisa, thank you so much. That's a really good idea. All right, let's see what else we've got. I'm going to keep an eye on the time too. I thought I'd blast through, but I never blast through, do I? My mouth runs. Let me check her next page. Start your dye supply. Now, this is really specific. This is a dye conversation. So for those of you who are dyers, now remember, Pearl McGowan teachers are very heavily linked to Cushing dyes. So that has been different through the ages. Different teachers who have certified through the ages have been allied to different dye companies, and that's just the way that it's been. But Pearl McGowan has always been sort of allied to Cushing. So Donna says, to start your dye supply with Cushing, get turkey red, bronze green, peacock, and bright purple. Interesting. Snuffle. That's the word I was thinking of, Lisa, like a snuffle mat, right? When you said thank you. Snuffle mat is what a lot of dogs like to do, that kind of forage, and you can hide dry food into a snuffle mat, and it gives the dog something to do, particularly a very intelligent dog like the Australian cattle dog, is super, super smart dog, constantly busy and frustrated because they want more outlets, projects, things to think about. So doing a snuffle mat and hiding like dry food under it will keep the dog busy for 3 minutes. Just kidding, like half an hour. Still, it goes by like this, and then you need another trick. This is an interesting color choice, and I think I want to talk more about this on a future episode. I love the colors that she's naming because I'm familiar with all of these Cushing colors. Turkey red is fantastic. Turkey red for me is one of these great shapeshifters where if you put a small amount in, it's a completely different color than if you give it like a higher dose. Bronze green is another one. Bronze green can go anywhere from like a gray pewter to like a patina color. I mean, it's an incredible chameleon of a color. Peacock is super. Cushing peacock is super vivid. Um, these are wonderful choices. She's making bright purple too. Bright purple is square on what it is. It's not as much of a shapeshifter. It's dead on that medium middle purple. Very handy because it's very easy to get to red grape and to blue grape. But sometimes you want just that purple that's right in the middle, and that can be hard to find with any brand. Cushing's bright purple is excellent as that middle purple. So let's talk more about dyes in a future episode because this is all important for those of you who do dyeing and just interesting to talk about color in general. She talks about taking a picture of your rug to critique it, like from a distance. And absolutely you could do that, but you can also put it on the floor and stand up on the bed or on a chair and look at it. Looking at it from a distance, I think, is the point to try to get perspective. I think it matters to everybody, but when you do realism, you need to constantly look at it. When you're doing a lot of fine shading, you need to constantly be able to stand back from it. And I think what she's suggesting, taking a photo of it, is you can make it a lot smaller. Looking at it smaller is a great trick. And to take that idea a step further, if you have a photo of your piece, you could then look at it in grayscale with filters on your phone or on your computer. And that's handy too because you can see where the contrast is and where the contrast is lacking. So taking a photo is a great idea, right? If you are phone literate, computer literate enough that this is not, you're not plugging things in and it's taking half the day to do this, it's a great thing to take a photo of with your phone, look at it in different scales or with different filters. It gives you different information than what your eyes can see when you're working on it this far away. Right? I don't do this enough. I don't stand back and look at my work enough. I know I'm going to stand back and look at that and go, that tree looks terrible. I made the sort of spines to it too thick. I can see that already, just looking at it on this monitor. So that's a very good trick. She said, here's an old-fashioned way to clean a rug. I think we know this one. It's so cute. This is a winter trick for those of us who live in cold climates. Spread light, fluffy snow on the rug and then sweep. This lifts the dirt out of the rug. She also says in one of her other tips, I'm not sure if I put it here, to put the rug upside down, like shake it or stomp on it upside down to try to bring a rug, if you're trying to get dirt out of it, to the surface. So whether you are sweeping it, vacuuming it, people have mixed feelings about vacuuming it. She's saying just like beat it or put it upside down a bit to get all that dirt to go to the surface, because with a hooked rug, you don't expect the dirt to go in between unless you're a very loose hooker. God forbid, it really is already on the surface. So you're just encouraging it to stay on the surface or for more to rise to the surface. Jen says, definitely making a snuffle mat for my super busy golden doodle today. Great, do it. You're going to do it today too. I love it. It is an awesome idea and it's so easy. You know what's a great backing for a snuffle mat is like a dishcloth, right? If it's kind of a loose dishcloth, it's amazing how well you can prod. You could even put a tiny snip in to prod big, huge pieces. Like, you have a dishcloth or a face cloth that's had it. Cut it into 3 pieces, huge pieces, and just pull them through, It'll be even more exciting for the dog. Let's see. Wool to repair an antique can be hung on the line for a few days or weeks to age it. That's a great idea because it gets more mellow when it's out there getting rained on. I was going to say pooped on, which sometimes happens. It's like we're under this tree that's like the poop target of the earth. But yeah, putting it outside will certainly soften it, mellow it, and age it without a doubt. That's a great tip. And she said when repairing an antique rug, it is best to use tapestry yarn for any sewing need as thread may cut the backing. That's a great idea. So when she says tapestry yarn, she really means that the crewel type yarn that's 100% wool and a bit thicker. So that comes with embroidery sets, needlepoint sets, right? Erica Wilson type stuff. We talk about this sometime. Often found at yard sales, Goodwill stores, certainly on eBay. Any kind of a needlepoint kit, absolutely from the 60s, 70s, 80s, that comes loaded with wool materials. It will be 100% wool, probably Persian wool at that. That's the kind of wool that she's suggesting using because it's not as glossy, as fine, or as, I don't want to say strong. but it's not as thin with so much potential to cut and to rip as it goes, like a little kind of guillotine, right? It's so strong. When you use the wool, it's a bit thicker, it's a bit wider. There's a better chance of getting a good color blend. So I think that's a great tip, using wool, kind of tapestry yarn slash Persian wool to do repairs or to do any of your sewing makes a lot more sense than a real sharp, skinny little piece of thread. I think we all know this one. I hope never fold a rug. You roll it with the loops out, because when you fold it, you're putting a lot of stress on that backing, right? And the backing will split. It will split. Even on newer rugs, you want to be careful with that stuff. Always roll it loops out. This is another good color one. For hooking trees, use Cushing, spice brown, that's a Cushing color, over pink wool. Now that's a great idea because it gives it a warmth, doesn't it? It gives it like a built-in warmth when you dye the spice brown is another shapeshifter of a color. It's one of my favorite Cushing colors. I'm going to get ready to put this down. We can continue on this because I had about 100 more to do, but it starts these great side conversations that I think are super helpful. I can hear the kids climbing up the stairs and going down the stairs on their rear ends. Not super desirable because my mother isn't going to like that for long. So I think it's almost Friendly's time. If you are not a Cushing user and you prefer other brands, I would say colors that are akin to Spice Brown. Spice Brown is a real unique one. It's a real wild color, like Mummy Brown, also in the Cushing line, that is exceptionally pretty and has a lot of variety from small amount of grain to quite a bit. But in other brands, I really like Dharma's Fawn color. Is another soft brown that could easily be done for like highlights on trees or lighter trees. It's an unusual color. It's very different. Um, Dharma's, what's it called? Bronze. I think it's just called bronze. A very low dose of it, very small amount, does make a really wacky gray brown before it gets to the bronze color. So that's another interesting one. Their bronze and their pewter at Dharma make very unusual earthy colors in small amounts. With ProChem, some of my favorite colors that I use with them, they have a color that's just called brown. And it doesn't have a lot of variety from low to much higher concentration, but that makes it great for a swatch set too, because the lightest version of it looks almost exactly like the most intense, with not a lot of color change, because you know when you're dyeing something, you put your wool in and different colors that are within your color of dye strike at different times and attach to the wool at different times. Yes, they do make fribbles at Friendly's. And they still make awful awfuls at Newport Creamery, if you know that chain. Um, and because the colors strike differently, you know, you would think in a brown, how would there possibly be fuchsia or turquoise in brown? There is fuchsia and turquoise in many browns, and those strike first. So you get those rosier colors first, maybe, or depending on the color, it'll be different. But with the brown, the ProChem brown, it's pretty much the same. You know, as soon as you put it in, it's just a lighter version of what you'll get later. Not every color works like that. You don't want every color to work like that. Creates all this interest for dyers when you figure out which ones do and which ones don't. But ProChem's just brown, plain brown, is a great color. And for a yellow brown, I find their toffee to be one of their most interesting colors. Maple sugar is a good color for them too, but toffee is a yellow brown that can go quite more toward a caramel color. It's another very unusual color that looks different with different intensities, and it makes a fantastic neutral. So these are all, you know, spice brown. Absolutely, spice brown is one of my favorite colors ever. My issue with Cushing is always the Cushing dyes is always the packet. I do not enjoy using that packet, and I know people like to open the packets and empty them into old pill containers and things like that to try to keep them contained. I just prefer to work out of a pot. It's just a convenience thing with me. I always have my masks on and my gloves because I do it so often. But that packet drives me crazy. I just wish that they would start, producing this very same thing in a different container. My packet gets wet no matter what. I do have a bit of a frantic and distracted, scattered kind of a life with children in the background, but it always gets wet and it drives me crazy. They did their sort of evolution of the paper packet within the envelope that both things got wet, right? And then it's like solid as a block and you're just chipping pieces off and hoping it still has some integrity. And the next evolution was the foil envelope, which I liked, but the foil envelope ripped easy and then it starts to leak deadly powder into the outer envelope, I still preferred the foil over the paper, right? Because at least it was waterproof. And now they're doing the little jewelry bag inside, and I don't like that one at all because I open it and it's like, Hiroshima. That was an awful reference, but you know what I mean. God forbid, that was awful. But different things. So I tend to use more of the other lines just because I find that the way that they are packaged is a lot easier and safer for me. But Cushing does have some colors, like the ones Donna named, that are just phenomenal. We'll do an episode just on colors. We should do a whole series on colors, where colors come from, where the pigments come from. Maybe I could get my sister at Yale involved in that. She did a little bit with color with me for that, what was it, Tudor? No, Elizabethan episode where we talked about the difference between dyeing, for example, fibers like wool, or creating dyes that would go into a paint pigment. That was a nice long show. Oh, do you, Karen? They are so good. And Dell's Lemonade. Dell's Lemonade is Rhode Island thing. It actually was started by an Italian guy who came over from Italy and actually brought ice with him and lemons. Like somehow he thought that wouldn't be here, and he somehow packed it on a boat, like in the early 20th century. And when he got here, he realized the climate was such that you do sometimes get snow. Not a ton in Rhode Island, but we always got it when I was living there. I grew up there. My favorite state still. But yeah, and he had this special direct lemon thing where he was squeezing lemons from Italy. And our buddy Kaz is in Italy right now, taking all kinds of pictures of Florence that she's going to transfer into rug cooking designs. All these beautiful borders and mosaics and things. She's posting them like crazy in our Facebook group, and it's super inspiring. What Dell's Lemonade is a real Rhode Island thing. And when I was a tour guide, I used to have this crazy statistic. I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. Coffee milk, like squirting the coffee milk instead of the Hershey's chocolate. So it's the same product, but it's made, there's two brands that make it in Rhode Island that have been fighting forever. I think Autocrat is the superior one, but they've been fighting for like a century about which one is better, coffee syrup. But coffee milk outsells chocolate milk in Rhode Island something like 300 to 1. It's like a crazy number. Rhode Islanders love their coffee cabinets. They don't say shake, they say cabinets. Isn't that funny, the different things that we say in different places? Well, I was so worried about this episode because I forgot my Atha magazine, so we'll look at that next week. But I think next week we'll look at Atha and we'll return to tips and start talking through some of these talking points, because the things that you come up with in the margin are super important too, and they get me thinking about all kinds of things. So don't forget about bingo night coming up on Friday night. Bingo night, all geometrics, and that'll be a fun episode for us, looking at geometric rugs. You have the chance to win big money, right? People usually win something in the 30s if you have the winning card. 12 different cards. You can buy as many as you can cross off, right? As many as you can manage, just like regular bingo. You're just crossing off calls as I make calls. I'll describe it more on bingo night. Bingo night is Friday, cocktail night on Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be there to spin our Wheel of Fortune, make those great bingo calls. Wish you all super good luck. So make sure you get those cards in time and look at what's going on Ribbon Candy Hooking. There's all kinds of new products up right now. I put up a giant 100-piece novelty and wool sampler of 2-yard cuts, 100 2-yard cuts. For those of you who love to hook in the Canadian style with lots of height, lots of variety, lots of novelty, lots of color and texture choices, 100 different yarns, no repeats, is in the Ribbon Candy Hooking store now too. So I think that's a really nice product that you can use for all kinds of hooking projects, right? Just it's good to have in your stash, because if you had to buy obviously 100 different yarns, that would be outrageous, right? That would be insane. So have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thanks for coming on with me a little bit early. Remember bingo on Friday, and in the meantime, happy Pink Day to you. Happy Pink Day. Let me know what you're working on, and remember, right through the month, it's going to be 3 full weeks away at this point, but right through the month, if you're working on great pieces, Robin, I took your piece off Facebook, that piece you did that was made out of some thrifty materials and the kind of denim-y colors. I took that. I took some sneaky ones, but feel free to send me any pieces that you're working on or designs that you're working on that I can share on the next gallery night in July. You can always send those to me too, or any questions to ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Happy Pink Day. I will see you on Friday for bingo night. Oh, wait a minute. Who is it? Oh, it's you, Mom. Ah, I thought it was Jocelyn making another cameo. She wanted to. Happy Pink Day. Thumbs up, please. Thank you.